This little video is just to share with you a few of the tips that I picked up over the years. And we're going to start with a painting that I began over a year ago. And the Lord gave me this idea, and I took my daughter outside and I photographed her, and it's supposed to feel a lot like Song of Solomon, the bride. And the style I was going for was Muka. And so that was the background that I was putting into the painting that I felt was supposed to be in the painting. The first tip I have for you today is to remember that white is not just white. It reflects the colors in the atmosphere around it. As you can see, we have reflective color coming on to the right with some yellow, and the blue is coming in there just subtly, but it is there. Now if I take and I pull this red in there, you can see the color change and the shift happening with the reflective color. And we just have to remember that when we're painting white, when we're doing anything white in our paintings, that we take into account the reflective color in the atmosphere around it. As you can see with the painting that I'm working on here, the color of the dress is white. Your mind tells you it's white, but I've included dozens of colors in the white, which include reflective color of the environment around it. And you can see in shadow areas, you can use blues, purples, and other colors to reflect the fact that the fabric is going in deeper into the recesses. And even the white highlight areas a lot of times pick up a warmer cream or yellow, depending on the kind of lighting that you have. Okay, now I'd like to point out the use of soft lines for our tip number 2. When you have anything in the background, you can create distance by having softer lines. It shows that there's atmosphere. It shows that there's a great amount of depth between your subject and the background. And we use this consciously. We don't let anything be subconscious in our paintings. We make choices, and this is a choice to have it recede back in space by the use of soft lines. And you can also see then the use of hard lines or sharp lines actually bring it forward in space, but it also draws people's attention to an area. Areas that have hard lines are going to get people's attention, and their eye actually goes to hard lines before anything else. All right, one thing you make note of when you're choosing your composition is when things hang off the composition. Now, a lot of times it will lead the eye of the viewer out of the page. So what I'm going to come back in here and do is soften up this section so that it's softer, like over here, so that the eye is not dragged off the page with the composition. Now with this painting, I did some outlining because I was going with this style of Muka. And outlining, you can use thick lines and thin lines, and it's good to vary the weight of your line width. As you can see here, there's some thin little areas and it goes thicker. I'm still working on this, but it's thicker can also indicate shadow or can indicate weight when you have thicker lines. So be conscious of how you use your lines and where you use your lines, and if lines are part of the style of paintings you do, vary the width of the lines to indicate weight. So when I finish up a painting, I double check my lines. I double check the weight of my lines, and also if there are any harsh areas that need to be softened, and if there's anything hanging off the edge of a page. And it will improve your painting when you have fine-tuned your lines. And another thing you can add to finishing off your paintings is scumbling. Any areas that seem too sharp, you can take and drag some paint just lightly over the area to soften it, so that it draws attention away from that area and doesn't make it too harsh. So those are 2 fine-tuning tips for lines. Now another tip is color placement. We want to choose exactly where we lay down each color. And you can put complementary colors next to each other for added dramatic effect, and it actually creates a friction in the eye when you have complements together, and people are drawn to color areas like that. For example, you have this yellowy gold area next to this bluish line. It's just the placement of them that draws extra color emphasis. or here with these two complementary colors here going in through the hair. We can be very selective about the choice of color, and this is something that Van Gogh did a lot. If you study his painting of the chair and you look really closely at the fine areas and you see the exact placement of certain colors next to each other, it's vibrant, it's alive, it adds so much to the painting. And our God is a God of color, and heaven is including millions more colors than we have here. And I really believe God wants us to emphasize color and use color to its fullest advantage. There's also ways we can create color harmony. Depending on the kind of painting you are working with, you may want to incorporate a flow of harmony of colors within the painting. For example, if there's blue up in here, you want to incorporate some blues in other areas of your painting. And if there's green here, you might add a little touch of green in different places so that you have this color harmony that blends the painting and brings a balance to it. And remember, if your color is too vibrant, you can always gray down the color with the opposite color on the color wheel. And that just brings it back a touch, and you can gray it down and allows it to be less vibrant in situations where you need it to be more subtle. Another thing you want to be aware of is the contrast in your painting. You want white whites and dark darks, otherwise your painting appears gray and flat. Step back, look at it, and sometimes you might want to photograph it in black and white and see the contrast. It's more apparent in black and white.
Many prophetic artists get a vision of an image from God and they paint it. They don't think to ask the Lord about the background. A good painting has thought put into the foreground, middle ground, and background. There is purpose to each layer, and they can contain a unified message. Jesus used layers of visual images in his parables. God can give a message for the foreground, middle ground, and background. My daughter attends one of the best art schools, and she was challenged in her critiques to have backgrounds with meanings. The school teaches heavily on conceptual art, that the concept or meaning of an object carries just as much weight as your skill as an artist. We should be asking the Lord for more, to include depth in our paintings and hidden messages. He wants us to be challenged to go deeper. You have not because you ask not, so ask. See what the Lord gives you for your foreground, middle ground, and background.
Remember to mix a variety of colors on your palette. Don't just use tube colors. Get creative and inventive and mix the colors that you're working with. Try to create a color grouping that you select very carefully for your painting. Don't just go and bring every tube of paint out of your box and throw it into your painting just because you have it. Be selective and think carefully about the color choices ahead of time. But then mix some colors together within the families that you're working with. And you want to create harmony. You want to create vibrancy within your colors. Okay, another tip is to pay attention to where the subject matter is looking in your painting. Because wherever your subject matter is looking, your viewer is going to immediately look to. And it's going to create a flow in the composition of where people look. And you want to be conscious of the eye pattern and flow of where people are searching through your painting and looking. For example, in this painting, you notice her eyes are looking up at the dove. And so you're creating a track where people are going to automatically go from her eye to the dove. And then we follow this painting along where there's branching along this side, and we can actually feel this circular motion going on in the composition of where your eye will travel when you go through this painting compositionally. In this painting, you want to observe too where we have these lines bringing you into the painting. Sometimes a line can bring you out of a painting, but because this is a narrow line going to thicker, it actually draws you up and into the painting. And these are things we want to be conscious of as we're designing and creating what God has given us. We can be aware of our compositional choices. And line is extremely important, and the use of eyes where the eyes are going. Another tip a lot of artists don't know about is the rule of thirds. It's where you take a painting, you divide it into 9 sections, and where the sections intersect are key places where you want to have a focus. In those focus areas, when you place an object in them, it draws the best attention and it will get the most impact for your composition. So even in photography, remember the rule of thirds. For information about prophetic art, check out my book, Shadow Painter. It's available on my website and on Amazon. You can also see my website for articles and other short videos at shadowpainter.org. Remember to listen to the Lord and follow His lead in your art. I'm Laurie Stasi.